Hello and welcome to episode 76 of Driver's Seat Blog Radio. As always, I'm your host, David G. Firestone. So I have to discuss what happened last week. Last week I had a lot of issues that prevented me from uploading the podcast episode I'd written and was ready to go. First, I'm rebranding my second YouTube channel on July 1st, and I had some things happen in terms of content that I needed to work through. I also had to put one of my arcade video series on ice because the machine, which is a Greyhound Joker Poker bar top unit from 1982, has glitched out to the point that I don't feel comfortable using it regularly to prevent further damage. It's an old machine. I don't know where you can get parts for it. Even if I could, I don't know how to fix it. So the original plan for the 2023 replacement also ran into some hiccups with streaming issues, but I fixed all of them. Unfortunately, because of all of this, I ran out of time to work. But this ended up actually working out well for me too, because I was going to spend a lot of time talking about the PGA LIV golf merger, but I had to throw all of that out because so many changes came out since then that nothing I was going to say really matters anymore. So the LIV golf merger will happen at a much later date, at the very least until the end of my July vacation, though probably later. Let's get to the racing news. So for this, I don't even know how many times since its debut, the NASCAR Next Gen or 7th generation car is getting yet another set of quote-unquote upgrades. According to J-Ski, link in the description, alongside the right side door bars and extending towards the rear clip, teams will now be mandated to run a steel plate in addition to the chassis adjustments made for the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte Motor Speedway. The right side door bar gussets and the removal of the front clip V-braces are the changes that remain, in addition to the removal of the other front clip components to create a softer and larger crush zone for frontal impacts. Also included in the list of updates are front bumper strut softening, parentheses, modification of the existing parts, parentheses, the requirement of an empty front ballast box and a modified cross brace. NASCAR will incur the costs of all these updates. So, yeah. How many times in the last, I don't know, 11 months have there been numerous upgrades to this new generation car because there were issues with it? I'm still questioning the new logic of these Gen 7 cars. They're nowhere near the level of complete that the Gen 6 cars were during their first few seasons. But the costs of these new cars, if you remember, that are getting new designs almost every month, this is putting a lot of strain on teams that are already incurring large financial issues because of team mismanagement. I'll get to that in a few minutes with my next story. And I get that with every race car, there are design flaws not yet seen or not yet figured out. But the Gen 7 cars, in terms of redesigns, it's so much worse than the Gen 6 cars. I don't even understand what the upgrade was meant to accomplish at this point. Now we're going to move on to Joe Gibbs Racing, because on June 20th, 2023, this is from Jay's Healing in the description, Joe Gibbs Racing announced that it had received a significant investment from Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment, or HBSE, and Arctos ARCTOS partners. The minority investment aims to support Coach Gibbs' vision for the growth of JGR as a family company as a continued leader in NASCAR. Through the investment, Joe Gibbs will also become a limited partner in Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment, pending approval by the NBA and the NHL, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Quote, in recent years, I've been fortunate enough to get to know Coach Gibbs, and I'm proud to count him as a trusted friend and advisor, said HBSE's co-founder Josh Harris. Joe is a winner, first in football, and then with Joe Gibbs Racing, he has led organizations that build winning cultures on strong values and a deep commitment to family and faith. This investment and partnership aims to support his vision and allow Joe Gibbs Racing to continue its track record of excellence long into the future. Now, for those of you who don't know, according to Wikipedia, quote, Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment owns and operates the Philadelphia 76ers, the New Jersey Devils, the Delaware Bluecoats, which is an NBA G League team, the Utica Comets of the American Hockey League, the esports organization Dignitas, I'm not sure what aspect of esports they're in, the Prudential Center, and the Grammy Music Experience in New Jersey, amongst other brands. Now, I do think it's a good move, but it does come with a caveat. Because sadly, with the lack of funds and sponsorship, as well as rising costs, these new types of partnerships are probably going to be a permanent thing of the NASCAR Cup Series. Remember, most of the top teams in the Cup Series are having trouble making ends meet, let alone make a profit. Like Roush, Fenway, Keselowski Racing, and this new JGR agreement, more and more teams might have to sell minority stakes in teams to stay afloat. And if the new deals that NASCAR is working on are what we think they're going to be, it's going to become more commonplace. Racing and race teams are for-profit organizations. Money is needed to keep the lights on and the engines running. But with the current economic model, and if it persists, you're going to have more minority stakes being sold and more mergers. Again, NASCAR fan and viewership numbers are down. They're never going to go back up. This is the new reality. So I'm going to be talking a bit about, it is the Chicago Street Race, but it's a bit more than that, because by the time this podcast airs, the Chicago Street Race will be getting underway. And to my utter surprise, it seems that a lot of the details I've been worried about have been worked out, and everything appears, as of this writing, to be good to go. Now, I'm going to wait till the green flag flies to hold my judgment, and I may or may not upload a mini podcast with my thoughts on the race as a whole. I haven't made that decision yet. Now, as I said, I won't be attending in person this year. I'll be watching the proceedings from my couch. But I came across something that I didn't think about until I read this on Yahoo Sports. Something I didn't realize is that the Chicago Street Race is just one in the line of the new modern trend of downtown street racing. Because in 2023 alone, we either have or had races in the downtown areas of Miami, Nashville, Chicago, Las Vegas, Long Beach, and St. Petersburg. Now, while these are commonplace on an international level, they're becoming more and more prominent in America. So I have to ask the question, is this going to be the new trend for attracting fans to the sport? Maybe. I mean, it's certainly a new idea. Is it a good idea for the citizens of those locales? Maybe not. Keep in mind that unlike a dedicated road course or circle track, setting up these street courses for racing, you have a lot more logistics that have to be dealt with. Because again, these aren't just, an open plot of land in out in the suburbs or out in the sticks. These are literally in the middle of downtown Chicago, downtown Las Vegas, downtown Toronto, etc. These cause headaches for people who live and work in that area, obviously. These cause headaches for companies that are based in that area, obviously. And I'm going to say this about the street race. The fans might be into it, but if the citizens are not, that might make things a bit more complex. Hell, it might make things a lot more complex. These types of city events can be very lucrative, but there's always going to be blowback from the locals. For Chicago, there's already been a lot of blowback, and I would say that almost all of it is justified or justifiable. And I also know that there's a contract in place for 2 races in 2 years. But if the fans aren't won over and the citizens are not into it, the second race might be canceled. Remember what happened with New Orleans, with IndyCar a few years ago. And with the political regime change in Chicago with a new mayor and several new alderpersons, that could also come into play. So, considering all of this, I'm going to hold my final judgment until after the race. I'm not too optimistic about the outcome, but again, I want this to succeed. I just don't know how this is going to play out at this very moment. So I'm going to take my first break, and I'm going to discuss what happened what I discussed a few weeks ago with CM Punk AEW Collision, but we're also going to talk about Jim Ross, so I'll be right back. So we're back. Now, a few weeks ago, before all the technical issues, I discussed what was then the upcoming debut of AEW Collision and the then impending return of CM Punk. Now, I discussed the whole puddle of mud that took place with that disaster of a backstory and why I felt it might not be the best idea. Well, AEW Collision has been a thing, and I have to say that I liked the first episode. I liked it a lot. Now, granted, I still stand by everything I said about why CM Punk might not want to start his comeback here, but I thoroughly enjoyed this version of AEW. Number one, Collision didn't feature many of the outlaw, mud show, indie wrestler AEW mainstays, and that was a good thing, because the talent that they used on Collision was more of a traditional wrestling style as opposed to the newer, flippy, backyard gymnastics style. I thought the new commentary team was great, though I'll get to JR in a little bit. Now, for those of you who missed it a few weeks ago, here was the card for the debut episode. And again, this is spoilers, but it's 2 weeks ago. Number one, first match, Luchasaurus defeated Wardlow for the TNT Championship. Andrade El Idolo defeated Buddy Matthews. Miro defeated Tony Nese. Sky Blue defeated Will Nightingale, who Will Nightingale is actually, I'm thinking, very, very talented. Might be one of the best talented women on the roster. And they defeated the Outcasts, Tony Storm and Brisoho. And in the main event, CM Punk, along with a team called FDR, consisting of Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler, defeated Samoa Joe, Jay White, and Juice Robinson. Now, I was wondering, in terms of what TV ratings were the AEW was going to draw for this, and they actually did very well. Even for a Saturday night, this was good. The first episode of AEW Collision drew 816,000 viewers, and they did a .33 in the 18 to 49 demo, which is the key demo that for a show like that. Now, for AEW standards, I thought all the matches were good. Some were better than others, but there was one aspect of Collision that I thought really didn't live up to the hype. The commentary team was Kevin Kelly as the play-by-play commentator, Nigel McGuinness as the color commentator, and Jim Ross as the analyst. Now, first off, I don't think we really need three-person commentary teams at this point. That's sort of been worn out. I mean, WWE's proven you can have a two-person commentary team and it works very well. Because you're always going to have one guy or gal who's, I don't want to say yammering, but not being as useful as they could be. Well, unfortunately, that individual was Jim Ross. Now, before you all jump down my throat, and before you all call for my stringing up in Town Square, just hear me out. Jim Ross is one of the greatest wrestling commentators of all time. I think few, if anybody, will argue with me on that. He's obviously the greatest commentator of the last 30 years, and I think nobody will argue with me on that. But apparently he had had a fall before the Collision went on the air, and as a result of that, he sounded very tired and a little out of it while commentating. I love Jim Ross as a commentator. Wrestling fans love him. But he's 71 and not in the best of health. And while I get that he really loves what he does, as much as it hurts me to say this, every career has an expiration date, and I think JR's date is here if it's not past. Again, 71 and health issues. He reminds me a little bit of John Force, who's 74 and still runs the full NHRA Funny Car schedule. They're sort of two peas in a pod in this respect because they love what they do. They're considered to be the best that they do, but
how long can they continue at this level? And again, it really hurts me to say this, but we will never see the WWE Attitude Era Jim Ross who called some of the most iconic moments in the history of WWE again. And I like good old JR, but with all the evidence in front of me, I think he should just hang the headset up at this point. Maybe he could be used during a pay-per-view pre-show or during the main event in a pay-per-view every once in a while, but I don't think he should be regular commentating given all the current evidence. Again, he's clearly not in the best of health, and I think the best thing would be for him to step down from that role. And again, like John Force, Jim Ross loves what he does and is still decent at it, but both of their primes are over, and they should be considering their next moves if they aren't already. And they've both been so entrenched in what they do that they can't see themselves not being involved. Again, the fans love them, and they're icons in their fields, but Father Time waits for no legend. As much as I'd like to see both of them stick around for a while, I do think they might be considering moving on. And it hurts me to say that, but the truth is the truth, and call me a dick if you want to. So, I'm going to take my second break, because I'm going to discuss the Titanic submersible story, so I'll be right back. Welcome back. So for our final segment, I have to discuss the OceanGate Titan submersible story. It's not a submarine, it's submersible, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But this is one time in life where it is impossible for me to feel bad about anyone involved. I have what I call realistic sympathy. If you're a good person and you don't take stupid risks and you're just an honest person and you get cancer, or if you're like working on a cargo ship and it sinks, I feel bad for you because sometimes bad things happen to good people. But other people are in the predicament they're in because of themselves and have no one else to blame in that respect. And this is one of those stories. Yes, it's a horrific story, but nobody involved has anybody else to blame except themselves. Because everybody in life has a purpose. Some people's purpose is to serve as a warning to others. And this sums up Stockton Rush III of OceanGate perfectly. So Stockton Rush founded a company called OceanGate Expeditions. That company is not long for this world, and I expect bankruptcy proceedings to start very soon. This company was founded in 2009, and by the aforementioned Stockton Rush, who was one of the quote-unquote explorers, and I'm being very generous with that term, that was on the Titan during its ill-fated expedition. The company had developed their own submersibles, with the Titan being the one rated for some of the deepest depths to explore the Titanic, because the one thing you want to do is to name an explorer submersible after the doomed ship it's going to explore. That's not a bad omen at all. But what really got me about this ship, and I'm going to just quote this from the Toronto Sun, the Titan communicates with the surface via text messages, and it's also operated by a $20.99 video game controller, which is an Xbox controller. Now that part alone is something to consider, because if you think about this logically, it's a stupid move. Why? Because when it comes to the Xbox controller, that was their plan. That wasn't like a backup in case of an emergency. That was part of the primary plan. They wrote it down on paper and put it in the blueprints. And if they had developed their own controller but kept the Xbox controller as a backup system, I think that was a great idea, because as these idiots are finding out, if you have a system that fails, there should be a backup ready to go. I am not an engineer, but I figured this one out, but sadly it's not to be. Now, in addition to the controller, there were numerous other things that should have been red flags to investors and people who might be getting on board this. It used heavy pipes for ballast and had a history of technical limitations and issues, which I'll get to in a few minutes. And I think also I love the fact that OceanGate's tagline is "You're invited to dive with us," which is aged like milk in the Arizona desert in July. Now, let me explain why I don't feel bad for Stockton and the 4 other people that were on the Titan. It is literally this simple. If you as an individual pay $250,000 to board a submarine that looks like it was built in a backyard from a propane tank, has a very established history of technical limitations and issues, and is controlled with an Xbox controller, you deserve whatever you get. The first mission to the Titanic was on the Alvin submersible in 93, 94? But that was designed by smart people. Because it was designed as a submarine, as a submersible, but it had an escape compartment for the crew should something go wrong. This thing is basically a minivan-sized tube with heavy pipes and ballast, a touchscreen and a video game controller, with no real backup in case stuff went wrong. How does that work? And before anyone says, well, OceanGate is a reputable company, remember that at one point, Theranos was a reputable company. Well, they have experience with building submersibles and other submersibles. Yeah, the Corvair was produced by Chevy and the Pinto was produced by Ford. Because if you read history, and you are a history buff like me, you know that you could have something that takes years, if not decades, hundreds of millions of dollars to bring a project to the market, and then you need 1 or 2 very bad incidents to destroy this project. Now, I was looking at this not in relation to the Titan, but I think this is a perfect example. One of the best examples I could find was of the Tupolev Tu-144. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Tu-144, or Konkordsky, was basically the Soviet version of the Concorde, the supersonic airliner. But unlike the Concorde, it suffered from a litany of problems which never really were fixed or even could be fixed. But Konkordsky's death was hastened on May 23rd, 1978, when a brand new variant, specifically the T-144D, suffered an onboard fire and crashed. It killed 2 engineers, and this led to an almost instant ban on passenger service on the T-144, and the aircraft was retired shortly thereafter. Ironically enough, this situation would be mirrored by Air France Flight 4590, which was the only fatal crash of the Concorde jet almost 22 years later. Now, these are only a couple examples of 1 or 2 high-profile incidents dooming years of work and millions of resources and ending in an unceremonious fate. This is certainly going to doom OceanGate expeditions. Stockton Rush has become the latest name in the Wikipedia article list of inventors killed by their own invention. And the irony has not been lost on a lot of people that he's joining Thomas Andrews Jr., who was instrumental in bringing the Titanic, the doomed ship they were going to see, to life. But when it comes to the actual onboard experience, let's ask somebody who was actually on the sub, and that person is CBS reporter David Polk. He recounted his experience for People magazine, link in the description. These are his exact words. The submersible is very different from all the ones I had researched and looked at picture of. Those tend to be very cramped, very homely, and filled with cockpit controls. They look like a space shuttle cockpit. This sub is modern looking. It has cool lighting. And then there's the touchscreen computer that the pilots use for functions like the lights and the air and the measurement and depths and so on, and communicating with the surface. So it felt like you were getting to a minivan without chairs. The sub is made from a carbon fiber cylinder, so the walls are curved, so you just sit on the floor with your back against the curved wall. It holds 5 people comfortably as long as they alternate back, feet, back, feet, you know what I mean? But as you dive, it gets colder and colder. And they instruct you to bring layers and to wear layers and bring winter jackets and the ski socks because you don't wear shoes on the sub. It's also probably worth mentioning that there is no real toilet on board. There is a pee bottle and a set of Ziploc bags. Ugh. That's basically it. And if you have to go, you go to one end of the sub and you draw a privacy curtain, and Stockton Rush turns up the music loud as you go. Good to know that there's rockin' tunes on this thing. So anyway, and that's relevant because on the day of, you have a sandwich and a bottle of water, and that's it, because they don't expect this dive to take more than 10 or 12 hours. So think about the people who've been down there since Sunday. It's freezing cold. They apparently have no power because, remember, we lost communication with them, so they have no light. It's blacker than black. It's the darkest you could possibly imagine. Imagine being at the bottom of the sea and they have no food or water. Well, they actually were pretty much killed instantly, so that part of it really doesn't matter at that point. He continues, it takes a long time to get ready. It's treated much like a rocket launch. There are elaborate countdowns and checklists and inspections, and there's our twice daily mandatory briefings about the weather and the submersible required for everybody, even those who are not diving. So I would definitely say there's a culture of safety and operation of the submersible. Now that part is kind of ironic because there have been multiple things that have come out about Stockton Rush, who was basically talking about he broke a lot of rules to get this thing to go, and he basically wants to be known for the rules that he broke, and, well, can't say that he didn't get what he wanted. So David Poe continues, we all got inside before the dive, he says, and then the only real emergency that you can do anything about is a fire in the cabin. So he showed us where the fire extinguisher is. We tried putting on the smoke mask. Beyond that, the only thing you can do about a disaster is rise to the surface as quickly as possible. And Stockton shows us the 7 different ways you can do that. They can release sandbags. They can release the lead construction. I don't know if they're lead. They're heavy construction pipes. They can inflate the air bladder. They can release the legs of the sub and ditch those as weight. They can use their thrusters to get up. And if you wondered how his trip went, according to the article, Pogue never made it down some 13,000 feet to visit the Titanic wreckage. The Titan went down 37 feet. 37 feet before having to resurface, he says, end quote. Do I really need to say anything more than that? Now, in case you were wondering what makes the Titan a submersible and not a submarine, well, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, they explain the difference. A submarine has enough power to leave port and come back to port under its own power, as well as a rather long range, and they can communicate without outside help. Submersibles, on the other hand, have more limited power and range, and they need a mothership from which to launch, to return to, and for support and communications. And I'm going to close with this one particular quote from CNN during their live coverage on their website. As they were calculating when the oxygen supply was going to run out, this was an actual headline. Quote, a retired Navy captain says the 5 passengers would be very uncomfortable as the oxygen supply dwindles. No shit. Well, stupid is as stupid does. What can I say? And with that, episode 76 comes to an end. I'm going to be taking a very badly needed vacation until August 4th. I will be doing some storytime videos for the time being. I've got 3 from old videos I've done on my other channel and 1 new original video at the end of July. Until August 4th, I'm Dave Farson. Leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe to Driver Seat Blog Radio.